In the middle of a tragedy that needed no embellishment to make the case for why Hamas's acts are horrible and tragic, there is still this embellishment, and I believe it is rooted in a desire to strip humanity from the people of Palestine and justify doing what Max Miller and a number of other officials in the Israeli government have said,
Max
which
Miller
is to
an obscure Republican official. It does not matter what he says.
So every leftist, wait a minute, Robbie, every leftist in America was asked to apologize for some random protest.
They should apologize. They should apologize for their endorsement of terrorist attacks on innocent Israeli civilians, just as I am outraged by the retaliatory actions that are killing innocent Palestinian children everywhere. I care about both of these things and have said I care about both of these things over and over again. It is you and the idiotic, leftist, terrorist sympathizing people who do not care about the dead Israelis. They don't.
So I'm a terrorist.
And they've said it over and over again. Black Lives Matter has said it. The Harvard students have said it. The DSA in various locations have said it. The left endorses what Hamas did. They do. They endorse it.
The Harvard newspaper said exactly what the editorial page of Israel's major newspapers said.
I don't give a Briahna.
Okay, well, that's clear that that's your opinion, but the Israeli voices in Israel who are getting killed because their fascist right-wing government decides to keep 2.3 million
The Israelis are getting
people.
killed because a terrorist group targeted them. And they bear responsibility for what they did.
Well, Robbie, if you think you know more than Israelis in Israel, then you can feel free to have your position. But the position of Israelis who are the ones that are being victimized by this terrorism is that the fact of stripping the rights of 2.3 million people in an apartheid state on their border are conditions
justify terrorist attacks on civilians in those territories.
Do you think that justifies terrorist attacks?
No.
Well, I don't either, so why do you keep saying
Well, I don't think the occupation is justified either. Okay. So why are you saying that I do?
So, Robbie, I'm not saying that you do.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about a fascinating story involving a tweet that did not age well, okay? And this story stars woke progressive commentator Briahna Joy Gray, who worked at The Hill on their morning show Rising, and she ended up getting fired after claiming that she can't be fired, right? She bragged about not being able to be fired before in the past, but turns out she was wrong, right? She actually can be fired. This is what happens when your infinity stones of wokeness go to your head, right? You think that you're invincible and that you are immune from consequences. Now, this is not the first time I have discussed controversy involving an anchor at The Hill leaving the network abruptly. Before in the past, I had discussed the situation with The Hill and Kim Iverson, in which she ended up leaving The Hill because The Hill censored her and her ability to interview Dr. Fauci, even though she was the star of that network, okay? She was bringing in hundreds of thousands of viewers to that show that basically was dying after their last host had left and started her own independent platform. She came along, basically revived the show, and lo and behold, they wouldn't let her interview Dr. Fauci, I believe, because of her views on the vaccine and the pandemic. And they probably thought that she would be too tough on Fauci. And because The Hill is a corporate media outlet, they did what corporate media outlets do, trying to censor some of their best journalists, okay, the people that actually really should be pressing our public officials, because instead they probably wanted to softball Fauci so that he would continue to give them access. So she left, and again, that was a big deal. But this situation, again, is a little bit different, okay? And this situation involves Briahna Joy Gray getting fired after what appears to be disrespectful and unprofessional behavior during an interview with the sister, the relative of a hostage that is currently being held by Hamas. Now, this lady came on The Hill to talk about this hostage situation, right? To basically, discuss what was going on, okay? This woman obviously is very emotional about the situation, but Briahna Joy Gray, who has very not pro-Israel views, right? Some people go as far as to say anti-Semitic. It seems as if she's going to fail to hold back her emotions during this interview, in which, again, this lady comes on to say, hey, I'm not really trying to talk about politics or the politics of the situation as much as I'm really just trying to talk about this hostage situation and put the information out there and to tell my story. This is what she says. Yeah, Briahna Joy Gray is not going to like this woman and some of the things she said during this interview, and she's going to show it at the end of the interview, as this woman clearly is very emotional about what is happening with her sister and the hostage situation. Take a look.
I really see that you want to talk political things, and this is not my profession. I'm saying right now that we have an Israeli deal on the table and we're waiting for Hamas to say yes.
Unfortunately, that
We have
doesn't
a
seem
lot
to
of
be the case. I wish that it were, but unfortunately, that does not seem to be the case. Would you like to say anything else
This is
that
exactly
we should know
the
about
case that even Biden said himself. This is what the Egyptian government said. This is what the Qatari said just today. And this is what my government said. Hamas also said that they're waiting, they need to read the agreement and to decide whatever they want. I don't know, because what I'm getting is from the media, and I'm sure that you're getting it from the media itself yourself, because you're not in the negotiation team. So I'm here to talk about my sister. Please help me spread her story. Help me make people understand what she's going through as a woman in 2024. We are not 200 years ago. This is not okay that we have terror organizations that controlling the free world and people in the West letting it happen. What did my sister did wrong? Nothing. Nothing. We did nothing wrong.
Well,
this was happening inside our own country. Yeah. And if the world won't help us, we will see 9/11 the second time in the U.S. as well. Because we can already see in the United States, in Michigan, rallies that's calling death to America, not condemning terror organizations in Israel or any other place. In fact, is reflecting to your country as well.
I'm just going to push back against the implication that in Michigan, which has the largest Muslim and Arab population in America, that there is any threat of terrorism from our own people. And I would like to clarify also that one of the rationale that was presented for 9/11 was discussed with America's support of Israel's continued occupation of Palestine. So that's neither here nor there. I really do hope that Netanyahu agrees and Israel agrees to the ceasefire deal that could bring all the hostages, including your sister, home. And I'm sure many people watching are praying for her safety.
Thank you. Me too. And I really hope that you specifically will believe women when they say that they got hurt.
All right. Thanks for joining. Stick around. More Rising coming up next.
Yeah. So, again, a super awkward situation. As you can see there, Briahna Joy Gray, who is very passionate about, this foreign conflict, which is something that, it just really blows my mind. All the people in this country that are so passionate about what's going on overseas seem to be more passionate about these foreign conflicts than America. But anyways, she let that kind of get in the way of her awareness of the situation. And I'm going to talk more about that in regards to her being fired. But I actually want to play a clip of her with Glenn Greenwald in which she's going to speak out about her firing and give her side of the story in this situation, in which she claims that, hey, she tried to stay away from politics, but this woman was making it political. And this woman was basically targeting her, and she's essentially being fired for speaking out against Israel or criticizing Israel, not for what appeared to be kind of disrespectful and inappropriate behavior when she did the soul sister eye roll at the end of that interview. Take a look.
What happened there? Were you mocking and rolling your eyes at Israeli rape victims, or explain what it is that you were doing?
Of course not. And I am hesitant to give the Hill more clicks at this point, but I do encourage people to go and listen to the whole interview, because there's a couple of things. One is that this is not someone that the Hill reached out to. They weren't looking for a guest who was a family member of a hostage or who could give the perspective of what those family members are going to. This person offered themselves up, and very specifically when making the request, said that they wanted to talk to me. And when our producer, Joanne, forwarded the request to me, I don't have the exact language in front of me, but immediately a red flag went up, because it seemed to me that this was someone who had a personal vendetta and agenda against me. And I was cautioning Joanne against having yet another person on that wanted to litigate what they found distasteful about my own personal political views in the context of a show where I, as a host, really don't have the opportunity to go back and forth. I have to, moderate a show. Throughout this interview, it was I think very fine. I think her perspective is valuable and necessary. We were talking about her sister, how hard it is for her to be separated from her. It was, a compelling story. But then she started to interject political claims into the narrative. She made an Islamophobic comment suggesting that there was going to be terrorism in Dearborn, Michigan, because I suppose it's the largest Arab American community, so we should be afraid of what might happen in Dearborn. But she forced me, frankly, to push back against discredited false claims about events that did not happen on October 7th. And as I did that, she seemed to grow increasingly agitated. She would pivot between saying that she didn't want to talk about politics. And I said, okay, well, tell me about your sister. We'd love to hear about your sister. And then she would interject politics back into it. When I tried to ask her how she felt as the family of a hostage victim, about how Benjamin Netanyahu has been handling the return of the hostages, he has been protested, as you well know, in Israel for not prioritizing the return of the hostages, instead saying that he wants to obliterate Hamas before thinking about agreeing to any of these ceasefire deals. She again pivoted away, said she's not a politician, doesn't know about politics. But then, of course, toward the end, increasingly tried to make it personal about me. I pushed back the little bit that you saw there at the end. And frankly, that eye roll and exasperation is more about the stupidity of my producer making the choice to have this guest on who very predictably was going to make it into a personal attack about me than about that woman herself. And I would point out that Hind Medzig and another guest, Israeli guest, or I think she was actually a Iranian Zionist guest, have done the exact same thing when they've come on and then clipped the episodes afterward to launch very personal media attacks against me with a swarm of bots that we now know from reporting over the past week is coming directly from the Israeli government.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Now on X, she's saying that, hey, I wasn't fired for being disrespectful during an interview or unprofessional behavior during an interview. She's saying that, well, I was fired for being critical of the state of Israel, right? This is what she is putting out here in regards to the reason why she got fired. Now, what do I think about this? Now, personally, I don't know why she got fired, but I personally think that she probably was fired most likely because of the way she handled that interview and the fact that it seemed like she's letting her emotions get in the way of her job. And I'm not saying that her criticisms of Israel don't have anything to do with maybe motivations behind firing her, right? Because I'm not one of these people that tries to pretend like that's not a thing, right? That if you criticize Israel, that you don't get canceled. That most certainly does happen, right? So her criticism of Israel probably played into it, but I think she should have been aware enough to know that, hey, I'm extremely critical of Israel. Let me make sure that doesn't get in the way of my professionalism during this interview. And I think it's obvious when you look at the whole context of that conversation and the interactions that that's what she did, right? She let her emotions get in the way to the point where she was doing the soul sister eye roll as this woman was essentially pouring her heart out. Now, I get what she's saying from the standpoint of, well, she was making political statements. That is true, but you got to understand, she is an Israeli whose sister is kidnapped, okay, held hostage by a terrorist organization. I mean, yeah, she's not going to have political opinions or what she may define as, not a political opinion. She's not going to have opinions that are going to be aligned with your opinion when it comes to this conflict. That's just the reality of the situation. And that's something that she has to be aware of when you're interviewing somebody like that is currently dealing with a tragedy, right? And I think that, because she couldn't control her emotions, ultimately, that was the nail in her coffin, right? I mean, it's probably something that was coming anyways, all right? She's probably right about that. But regardless, when it comes to that specific situation, it was a very unprofessional thing to do. And I'm not necessarily buying into her explanation that, I was rolling my eyes at the producer for allowing this woman to come on the show or whatever. I mean, you could have recused yourself. You could have said, hey, you know what? I'm just not going to be a part of this interview where this lady's going to openly criticize me like that. I know that this is a topic that is very sensitive, and I just think in that situation, it's best that you take the most conservative approach and remain composed and don't feel the need to push back against everything because, again, you're not talking to a political person. You're talking to an individual whose sister is being held hostage, right? That's a very emotional person, and you really got to be careful how you navigate a situation like that. And, hey, it is what it is. I think personally that when the left faces cancel culture, all of a sudden they kind of realize that, this is what happens when you have opinions that, the establishment doesn't necessarily agree with. This is what happens, right? It happens to people on the right all the time. So I don't necessarily think that people should feel bad for her because it's her, because I mean, these same people don't feel bad for people on the right who get canceled for having opinions that are outside of what the establishment finds to be acceptable. I just think in this case for her, yeah, that was extremely unprofessional behavior. I just wish that, other mainstream liberal media pundits like Joy Reid, for example, were held accountable, like Briahna Joy Gray was held accountable when it comes to their unprofessionalism in interviews as well, right? I think that's the most unfortunate part about it. Again, I'm not saying that I'm celebrating what happened to her or I'm happy about what happened to her. Because honestly, I don't know exactly why she was fired, but that is the speculation in regards to what ultimately led to her firing, right? It's the same thing that happened to Don Lemon, okay? When he started basically pushing back against Vivek Ramaswamy in a very unprofessional way. I think he was like, whatever you are, right? You can't speak on the history of this country, okay? You can't speak on black issues because you're Indian. Yeah, that's a very unprofessional thing for a journalist to say that works for a major news network, right? That's just kind of out of line, okay? And again, like Don Lemon, I think that Briahna Joy Gray, this probably was something that was coming, right? Don Lemon was probably on the chopping block, and that was the nail in the coffin. It is what it is. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a black conservative perspective. Peace.